I am.
Hello there. Well, first off, you're one of the founders of the Centre for Pagan Studies. Did you believe there was a great need for it, or was it just something you just wanted to do? You know.
No, I concluded the idea of putting together the Centre for Pagan Studies for some very specific reasons, and that was that when I'd been in the craft a very long time by the time I decided to do this, 7 years ago probably now, when I first came up with the idea. And the reason that I wanted to put this thing together was for the fact that I kept seeing adverts in the back of Prediction and several other things for courses. And these courses would be, I don't know, witchcraft by the post, join this, and it was all handing over fairly large amounts of money.
Yeah.
I also, because of personal experiences and trying to help people where I possibly could, was in a situation where people, I understood and I could see, and it doesn't take much working out, that people that all of a sudden find that they have a spirituality that they can't quite explain need to hook into it in one way, form or another. And not everybody is great. Not everybody in the craft, or on the fringes, and I think it's on the fringes that we're talking about, is honest and true. So there are charlatans out there. I'd love to say that everybody was Fluffy Bunny, but they're not.
Yeah.
So I can remember when I actually said I've got to do something about this personally, was when I saw a particular advert that was advertising a runes weekend, and I knew somebody that had been on this runes weekend, and it was a case of you went up to an out of season hotel, bed and breakfast, somewhere up on the northeast coast, and you arrived Friday evening after dinner. There was a bit of a meeting in the evening for everybody to get to know themselves, get to know each other, and then Saturday morning there was a breakfast, and people would be taken via a minibus down to the beach to collect stones off the beach. They would come back, have lunch, a sandwich lunch, and then in the afternoon they would sit down and they would all be issued with the paints, and they would actually paint the runes onto the stones. So it's a great idea for the fact it's personal. And there was a brief explanation given to each one of the runic symbols as they were being painted.
So basically you could get it out of a book.
Oh, you could get it out of a book.
Yeah.
But there is also the fact, which I also appreciate, the fact that these people were doing something and mixing with other people that were also new to that particular aspect. So they would work through the afternoon, then they would have dinner, and then there was a bit of a social thing in the evening, and then the following morning there would be breakfast, and then it was merry meet, merry part, and off they go. So they actually didn't learn anything, but they painted some stones. They did have some communication with other people that were fresh, but it was, and I'm going back 10 years when I first saw this advert, maybe even longer, and it was 120 quid. So one of the first things that we did, one of the very first courses, because I wanted to get that out of my system, when we set the Centre for Pagan Studies up, was that we ran a runes and tarot weekend, and we charged 15 quid for people to come along. In that £15, they got the most wonderful spread of lunch, because I hated the fact that there was that.
No more sandwiches.
No. It was really great food, and we had a big barbecue, and there was a swimming pool there, and so we all had the pool, and we made it a social event, but it was not anything. There was no money involved really. All right, it was 15 quid,
you got but all money's worth.
But all of they first of all got all the money's worth, and every penny that we ever got went back into the building. I just spent probably £25,000 converting the Centre for Pagan Studies from an old derelict barn property into that. I never got back any of that money.
No.
That was just money that I spent because I wanted to do it, and I was in a position at the time where I could put something back. I've had some very good teachers in my life, and that was my opportunity to actually put something back. So the Centre for Pagan Studies was set up as a facility. We ran courses that were there that were all based on mostly historic things, with Ronald Hutton and, Doreen Valiente and a whole pile of other people. Doreen, if I can mention Doreen for a minute, she came along to one of our things. In fact, she came to a Halloween do that we did, which was a complete freebie. That we put hundreds of pounds into a wonderful firework display, and we had all that, and we had a big barbecue, and it was everybody come and meet everybody. And Doreen Valiente came along, and she and I got chatting. She's somebody I'd never met before, but obviously admired her work. And we got chatting, and a couple of days later, she phoned me, and she said, "John, this Centre for Pagan Studies of yours." And I said, "Yep." She said, "Would you mind if I got a bit more involved?" So I said, "Well, how do you mean?" And she said, "Well, I can't do a lot, but I could wash up." So that was Doreen's intro into it. After that, she was incredibly supportive of the stuff that she did. She knew that this was not a money-making organisation, and what we were trying to do was put back, and that was all we were ever trying to do, was put back. We had some great people that surround us, and we were putting back. So that was the Centre for Pagan Studies.
So in a way, you were trying to get rid of the fringe elements of the profiteers and the money men, things like that, which is a great idea. Going back to Doreen, I mean, you were the last person alive who knew Doreen so well.
Yeah.
What was she like as a person? I mean, everyone's read her books. I mean, she is the benchmark for the starting off for any new witch. Yeah. Things like Witchcraft for Tomorrow is the perfect primer for a witch.
Totally agree.
But what was she like as a person?
Well, Doreen and I very rarely ever talked about witchcraft. But what we did do is have a great deal of fun. She was a 77-year-old hippie, really. She was almost a product of. She was almost a 60s child, though she was born in 1922. She was somebody that could see the funny side of virtually everything. She had this West Country accent that always sounded slightly comical anyway, but she just would see the funny side of everything. And she was just incredibly sweet. We didn't talk witchcraft very often. When we did, I have to say that it was something which Doreen would bring up as a point, because I was always conscious of the fact that almost everybody that she spoke to wanted to know about witchcraft. And I just liked Doreen Valiente for Doreen Valiente. She was a game old bird, and she was great fun.
Yeah. A lot of people, obviously because of her writings, see her as pure Gardnerian, but she had more down-to-earth roots, didn't she? She wasn't strictly Gardnerian.
No, far from it. Well, one of the stories that she told me about her relationship with Gerald Gardner was about a possession of hers, which I now have, which she bequeathed to me, which was Gerald Gardner's original Book of Shadows. And Doreen, went through with Gerald. I mean, she was his high priestess and what have you. But there was a particular ritual that they were doing the one day, and Gerald had said that all of these things were from ancient text. And she turned, and a lot of it is, there's a lot of people that say that Gerald Gardner made the whole thing up. He didn't. We've got documentary evidence that he didn't. We've got stuff now that has been passed down that says Gerald Gardner didn't make it all up, but he did source. And one of the documents that one of the parts of the book of this particular ritual, Doreen turned round at the end of it and she said, "Gerald, I've read that before." And he said, "What do you mean you read it before?" She said, "I think I've seen that with Dennis Weekly or somebody." And he then turned round to her and he said, "Well, if you think you can do any better, you write the Book of Shadows." So the reason that I now have, or Doreen had possession of Gerald Gardner's original Book of Shadows, is because Doreen took it away and she rewrote the Book of Shadows. The Book of Shadows really that makes the most sense is Doreen Valiente's, and the book that we kind of all copy from is Doreen Valiente's Book of Shadows. What Doreen was able to do was take Gardner's original work, and she was then able to put the bones on it. She was a major academic. She was very interested in history of all kinds of things, and she turned it into poetry. She made rituals make sense. So I think there's more to be said that Gerald Gardner was the founder of it, but Doreen made the most sense of it. And there is actually a movement, I believe, now in America that are called the Doreenies.
Well, it doesn't surprise me in the least, basically. I mean, she obviously had a great influence on a lot of people. I mean, when I started off in witchcraft, like I say, her books were the mainstay.
No, me too.
Gerald Gardner's work, obviously, I read. I was not impressed with them, never have been.
Mm-hmm.
But what does she have to say about the Alexandrian tradition? Was she sceptical of the Alexandrians? Because you had all the...
No, she got a lot of time for that, because Doreen Valiente's best friend was Janet Farrar. Janet Farrar and Stuart were both initiated by Alexanders. So she had a lot of time for the teachings that Alexanders had been given, and for his knowledge. But she always put Alex down as what she wasn't. He was a great showman, and I understand that being a great showman or a showman can get you into trouble. But she, she was very respectful of him. I mean, she was one of the people that wanted to go to his funeral. There was, it did create problems, Alex's funeral. It turned into a bit of a circus.
Well, I think that Alex would probably preferred that, really, in many ways.
Yeah, I think he would. Yeah.
I've met Maxine Saunders. And
I've never met Maxine. I'd like to.
She's a very nice person. She's very knowledgeable, and I believe she's a very good teacher. I've known a few of her initiates who actually work for her.
Yeah, I have.
She's a great teacher. And it seems very strange that she should become a respected teacher, whereas Alex became more of a clown in a way. But
Alex only was a clown when he wanted to be a clown. I never met Alex Saunders, but I know people that did. Ray Linda Linfield, who helped set up the Centre for Pagan Studies, our partners in the whole thing. They were initiated by Alex, and they had massive respect for Alex, but they also knew that the other side of Alex was the fact that he did like to hold court. He used to hold court in the pub. He would sit there, and he knew that there were all these people that liked him, and he could say things and they'd take it as serious. Unfortunately, some of the things that he said that were taken as serious was backlash on him, because some people are not able to see the funny side of what he said. So I wish I had met him, actually, because I think we'd have got on very well.
Well, yeah, one of our writers, Kenneth Johnson, he met him, and he said he was always in the pub. He always liked to be in the pub. And he said to him in an interview, sort of like, basically, how do you afford to come into the pub? And he said, well, people like you keep buying me drinks.
Yeah, and that's the truth.
You're trying to set up a museum to celebrate Doreen's work and her artefacts and everything. What news on that? And
all right. I guess the best thing to do is start off with the history of it. And I know it's been written about before, but Doreen... I want to clear up a few things. I keep getting correspondence with people who tell me that Doreen turned round and said that on her death she wanted everything burnt. And there are people that have turned around that say all of Doreen's stuff shouldn't go on show. None of these things. Some of it won't go on show, but these things won't go on show. But Doreen decided, maybe Doreen did say those things. Maybe Doreen at some stage in her life said, "Oh, when I'm gone, I want everything burned. I don't want anything to do with that." And I promise you that if Doreen had have turned around to me and said, "John, what I want you to do is set fire to all this, like get rid of it," I would have cried bitterly because of the heritage that's there, the research that she did. But I would have done it. I would have got rid of it. I would have burnt every single piece. But she turned around, and I talked to her one day. I had no idea that Doreen Valiente was going to leave me this stuff, and that is absolutely the truth. I never asked her. We never discussed it. I'd been to her flat many times. I used to sit there, in this very, very small one room where there were 2,000 quite rare books, and a few artifacts on the wall. That's all. The Bell Book of Figures that that she used for herself, and odd bits and pieces. But there wasn't a lot on show. And then Doreen would be a person that would turn around, and she wouldn't want to offend anyone. So she wrote her will, and she wrote it not very long before she died, but she knew that with the illness that she had, cancer of the upper pancreas, that she could well lose her faculties, and she did, bless her. There were a long period of time where there was nothing came from Doreen's mouth until just before she died. But she asked me to do a couple of things within her will. She asked me if I would perform for her a small pagan funeral, and she left all of her magical artifacts and books to me. My first reaction was, and then she asked her stepson to come and talk to me about it, to give me a copy of the will and see if it was all right. Not so that she didn't have to ask me herself. So he came up and gave me a copy of the will and said, Doreen wants to have this copy of the will. I've never had a will before, so it's not a situation, despite the fact that some people have called me, I know some of the names that people call me, but amongst one of them is the Rich Witch. I was born and grew up in the centre of Birmingham on one of the most notorious council estates that there is. We had no money whatsoever. All I've done is work bloody hard all my life. But she left the stuff to me. First of all, so I'd never had a will. My father died when I was 17. There was no money to leave me.
Yeah.
So I had a copy of this will. I said, okay, and I put it to one side. And he said, no, I think you'd better open it and have a look. So I opened it up, had a look, and it said, I bequeath to John Belham-Payne. All the poetry goes to John, and the proceeds of the book of poetry, should go to the Centre for Pagan Studies. And there was no money involved. I didn't get any money from any of this. But she left me with all of this stuff, and I went to talk to her about it. And she said, is that all right? And I said, Doreen, you can't leave me all that stuff, And she said, well, that's what... Hiya!
Oh, hey, John.
Right, what?
All right.
No, it's all right.
I'm just creeping.
All right.
Gobbing off. See you in a while.
Oh, okay. So, I said, you can't leave me all this stuff. And she said, no, that's my decision. There were several people which I thought that she would leave it to, and I mentioned their names, and she said, no, I've decided it's going to be for you. I want you to have it because you'll know what to do with it. I also had the space. Let's be honest. I had space to store this stuff while we decided what we should do with it. But one thing that she did say to me at one stage, there was an evening where I went back to her flat, and I'm sitting there, which we I was now there every day, and we sat down there, and I looked around the room, which I'd done before, and there were the Bell Book of Figures, and there were odd bits and pieces but when I started to look, there were things, and I had no idea what they were. I had no idea at all. And I had to build the courage up, and I said, Doreen, if you've left me all this stuff, you'd better tell me what it is. And she said, I thought you'd never bloody ask. Right, under my bed, there is a box, and if you pull that box out, you'll find there's Gerald Gardner's Book of Shadows, original Book of Shadows. There's my Book of Shadows. There's a lot of the research material, and a lot of the stuff that was passed on to Gerald. So when people say that Gerald Gardner made it all up, I promise you hasn't, because we've got a lot of the stuff. But the thing that dismisses what people say, and maybe she did say those things, but staring death in the face, has a dramatic effect on people. I've now, unfortunately, become... I seem to be the person to be buried by. I seem to have buried more people than I've hand-fasted over the last few years. And I prefer the hand-fasting job, to be honest.
I hope it doesn't apply to us.
Yeah. But she turned round that evening and she said, well, and she said, everything's in here, John. She said, but it's all in plastic bags. And it was. Everything was wrapped up in plastic bags. The most beautiful hand-carved ivory wands and things that she'd collected from all over the world. there is a thing about ivory, of course, but they were beautiful items that existed.
Mhm.
You know, they were created for this purpose, and you know, they were wrapped in plastic bags. And I said, "Oh, Dory, you know, why didn't you ever do it? You know, has people seen this?" She says, "Oh no," she says, "I probably haven't seen that for 30 years myself." And I said, "Oh, you know," and she said, "John, it's been wrapped up in plastic bags for far too long, and I think people need to see it." So the people that she told that she was going to burn it all, she may well have meant it at the time, but she turned round and said that now she wanted people to see it.
And I think perhaps you might have been influenced by the centre, the need for people to be educated correctly rather than just sort of
I think so.
on the sidelines.
Well, she had a lot of respect for what we're trying to do, because it was never about money. You know, I knew I was never going to earn a fortune out of this place, but if I could put back, that's all I wanted to do, and the museum will be like that. Though we do need to charge people to come in, otherwise it will collapse. But anyway, we'll get to that. So Doreen has initially phoned up and she'd said, you know, "I'd like to be a bit more involved with the centre if you wouldn't mind, and can I wash up?" You know, with the best will in the world, poor old Doreen's legs were on the way out and she couldn't have washed up. Having said that, Marion Green, bless her, at Doreen Valiente's last ever talk, did wash up for us. You know, she rolled up her sleeves and said, "Oh, we've got to get on with it."
She
Through
fancies
witchcraft.
the new Doreen.
So, no, she just truly gets on with it. Sees a job and she needs to go in. We asked Doreen eventually if she wanted to do anything for us that really would help, and that is become our patron. And she said, "Well, I've got to be dead to do that, haven't I?" I said, "No, you don't." But she became our patron, and that was the best endorsement we ever could have got was Doreen Valiente's seal of approval on it, which she gave us. I'd become a member of the Pagan Federation committee at that stage. I never intended to. I was asked to stand and, you know, finished up being voted in. But when I only was there for 1 year, but Doreen asked me quite specifically to stand for a second term because she thought that there was things I could help with. And she wrote the proposal for me. You know, she wrote the proposal from Doreen, which helped with the votes, let me tell you.
Well, yeah.
But anyway, the museum. Right, where we're at with the museum now, and this week has been a very exciting week. We now have a collection of, just on Doreen stuff alone, and we've got more, because we've had other people donate stuff to us, and the promise of other collections donated to us. I promise you we haven't asked anybody ever for anything. They've actually come to us and said, if Doreen left her stuff to you, we'd like to do the same. We are now in a situation where, just on Doreen stuff alone, we've got 2,000 pretty rare books, some of which are, people who had never seen before. We also have just massive amounts of research material that all Doreen's writing, all her original manuscripts, other manuscripts by other writers, and I won't go into who they are, but we've also got manuscripts of other people that have sent them off to Doreen, and Doreen's rewritten them and sent them back, and they got published. So, you know, that's a separate matter, and I wouldn't ever disclose who they are.
Well, no.
But Doreen helped. Doreen was involved with a television company. The last interview that she ever did was about 9 months before she died. They, for Channel 4, they put out a book. I wish I could remember it. It was called The New Age. It was about New Age.
Yeah, I've got a bit of it on tape.
Yeah, that was it. And there was a book, and they asked Doreen if she would. One of the researchers asked Doreen if Doreen would give her some help on writing the little bit in there about witchcraft. So Doreen said, "Yes, I'll help. You know, what would you like me to do?" And so she said, "Well, this is what I've written." So she sent it in, and Doreen rewrote it. So the section in the book from the New Age is all Doreen's, but she doesn't get credit in the book for it because she said, "Oh no, dear, I don't need any more. I don't need any more publicity on that. I think I would rather it be in your name." So Doreen did a lot of that. So we've got all of this massive amount of research that Doreen did. We've got stuff that Doreen never published. We have a book that Doreen never published. All of which there was obviously the poetry, which I'm very proud of that book that we put together. That was Doreen's last thing that she ever asked me to do. I said, "Is there anything, Doreen, that you want to do that you haven't done?" And she said, "I'd like to see my poems published." She left that as a specific task because I didn't ever intend to publish it myself. But she said, "No." I said, "Look, I promise you, Doreen, that will get published, even if I have to publish it myself." And in the will, she asked me specifically to publish it myself. So that was a learning curve. And the guys at Hexagon were brilliant to helping me achieve that. The other thing that we have is this massive collection of artifacts that when you open them up, I mean, they're just beautiful. And the choice is, and whichever way I go, I'm going to be criticised. You know, I know it, you know it, everybody knows it. If I put this stuff on display, there will be a great number of people that will come out of the woodwork and say, "I know Doreen Valiente never wanted this stuff shown.
Should have been burned.
Should have been burned." Right. So I won't win with those people. A lot of those self-same people get in touch and they say, "We'd like to have access to Doreen's stuff. But we don't think it should go on display." So they would like to see it, but they don't want anybody else to see it. You know? I could have the world's greatest altar. You know, let's face it, Doreen Valiente's collection is not the largest in the world, but it is certainly the most famous in the world. All the books have used Doreen's stuff for photographs and things. You know, so if I open a museum, I will then be accused by other people of showing this stuff. You know, and Doreen never wanted it shown. She did. She was a very modest lady. People called her the mother of modern witchcraft, and she'd say, "Oh, I wish they wouldn't call me that," she says, "because I never wanted children." But she was always flattered by the title, though she'd never say it. She'd just got this great sense of humour. So, we've got all of this stuff in boxes. We've got all of this wonderful research material. We've got 2,000 books. You know, I've got this. I have the choice of this fabulous library, this fabulous altar, or I've got to share it, and I want to share it. So, we have been in negotiations for quite some time, and to research and put a business plan together, to actually put this museum together in a modern way, so that there is a theatre, you know, a small theatre, an audio-visual presentation that tells the truth about witchcraft. We have now got people all over Europe helping us collate the names of all of the witches that were either tortured or arrested or murdered, of which that's one of Gerald Gardner's actually much misunderstood quotes about the 19 million. But that's another story. We want this museum to be in Sussex because it's the most natural place for it to be. The tourist board have advised me to put it in London. They said it'll cost you 4 times the amount of money, but you get 10 times the amount of visitors.
I can see the logic behind it.
Yeah, I understand that. And I live in Spain now, don't I? I moved to Spain. So it's a case of, you know, where is the best place for it to go? So we this week have actually put on the table to 2 councils, Brighton being one and Hastings being the other, a complete show of what we want to do, because we want to work with the council, not present them with the fait accompli, the fact that, you know, we're going to do it and sod you. We want their help. We want to be members of the tourist board. We want to be, you know, to have access to all the publicity that can surround that. But we want to tell the truth. So the museum will be an entertaining place. You know, Graham King down at Boscastle does a great job. I totally admire Graham and the way that he's turned that museum around. And, you know, we're far from in competition with him on that. In fact, you know, we've talked about joint shows and all kinds of stuff.
Well, it could be a case, I suppose, where you could actually exchange exhibits from time to time, like various museums do in galleries.
Absolutely, yeah. And Graham's got stuff that he's got duplicated, and we've got stuff that's duplicated. And, you know, if we can do an exchange on that, and, you know, we will probably have more European tourists that will approach there because of our access to London and to the Channel Tunnel and all that sort of stuff. So I think we will be able to say, well, if you like this, go and have a look at that.
Well, the Brighton and Sussex area has been very popular anyway. It's been very
it is.
trendy.
Absolutely.
Very trendy.
Yeah, absolutely it is, and it's day trippable from London. That's the other thing. So
Right.
there's lots of reasons for doing it. But it was Doreen's home. She lived in Brighton for nearly 30 years.
And again, also Alexander's lived in Hastings area.
I can give you two sets of
Crowley was.
yeah. Well, I can
So-
give you two sets of things as to why it should be in Brighton and why it should be in Hastings. It should be in Brighton because it was Doreen Valiente's home. That's the biggest reason. But it should be in Hastings for a whole number of other reasons. Hastings was, as you say, it was the birthplace of Crowley. Crowley spent many of his years there. Alex Saunders lived there for all of those years. It is still the home of the Metaphysical Society. The pre-Raphaelite painters were in Hastings. One of them, I can't remember the man's name, was always at one of the pubs there. That, had a room permanently there, and a lot of his paintings were there. Hastings is now currently the Jack in the Green Festival.
That's
Comes
right,
there.
yeah.
That's the largest pagan procession in the world. We spoke to the business development manager yesterday at Hastings to present all of this stuff to, and he was very aware of all of these things. He was incredibly encouraging, and Hastings has got this whole big development program. The pier has just been redeveloped. There is plans to develop each side of the pier with a huge glass thing, So there are great reasons for it to being in either one of the places. But what was interesting was that we presented this man with a business plan that shows him some of the artifacts, but we told the truth, and we said this is a story about what happened to a section of our people throughout history, and we want people to know it, but we want to do it in an entertaining way. The museum will not be a museum set up for pagans. It will be a museum that's set up for people because they know anyway. They should know. I don't have to tell these people what the story is. But what should happen is that somebody that doesn't know anything approaches this museum, thinks it might be a bit spooky. We won't portray it that way, but thinks, ooh, witchcraft. Will arrive there, go through the door, and if I do my job right, they will go through that door, and while they've gone through a whole number of scenes and through an audio-visual display, we've got plans to use the latest technology, where you can even use your mobile phone in this place to get information. And it's cutting-edge stuff, but nevertheless, there will be a situation where you walk into the museum and you can put a set of headphones on, walk around the museum, and it will tell you everything that's going on in many languages. Great deal of languages.
There's a place like that in Northumbria.
Yeah, no, this is not. It
Similar
might
sort
be
of thing,
cutting edge. It's not my idea, but it's just how
Where you could
museums
go.
are moving. Yeah, and it's the way we want to go. We're now looking at trying to get grants, though I have to say that the grant situation is difficult. We got pretty much short-changed with the National Lottery. A large proportion of the people that are on the boards of these things are Christian ministers and things. And, we now get a regular update of the amount of, where the lottery is being spent. And we worked out something like 30% of all the lottery stuff is going on restoring churches.
What a surprise.
There isn't a penny so far been spent on, doing anything to ancient pagan sites. What a surprise.
No. Well, the less said about that, the better, I think.
Yeah. So, if I do my job right, people walk in through the door of this place, and by the time they reach the door coming out at the other side, having bought one of our bumper stickers that says, witches do it better on broomsticks or whatever. But by the time they've actually gone through the museum and they come out the other side, hopefully they'll go, it wasn't quite what I thought it was. And if we can do that, if we can actually do that to the general public, that's all I want to achieve.
Yeah, one of the problems with the original Witchcraft Museum in Boscastle when Cecil Williamson was running it.
Yeah.
I mean, we met as Cecil and lovely.
Yeah, great.
But his idea was the museum couldn't make money unless you gave it that sort of sensationalist, spooky atmosphere. It wouldn't work otherwise. So that's what it's for. It's the penny dreadful for the tourist trade. That was it.
Yeah. It don't need to be like that.
No.
We make it entertaining and tell a good story, but a true story, I recently went to. I was really fired up last September. I went to. There are only two museums of witchcraft anywhere in the world at the moment. Boscastle is the one and the best, and the other one is in Salem, Massachusetts. Salem Witchcraft Trials. They don't have a single artifact at Salem. But it tells the story with a whole set of scenes. And I'd like to be somewhere in between the two. Now, there is a travelling museum that goes around Europe that was put together at the end of another century. At the end of the 19th century, by an Italian who went around Europe collecting odd facts, odd things, and he put together this incredible touring museum on witchcraft, and we happened to see it in a place called Ronda out in Spain. And we went into this thing, and there wasn't a single artifact. There wasn't a pentacle. There wasn't anything to do with that. There were things in jars. There were lots of herbs. There were stuffed monkeys that were put into the shape of actually, I know it sounds awful, but it was this wonderful god and goddess pair of figures that were stuffed monkeys. And however repulsive that sounds, they actually looked fantastic. They were very regal. And he told a great story. There were all the torture instruments that we used. And we hung around in this place for several hours just to see the amount of people that came in, just to see what their reaction to it was, and to nick the odd idea if we could. But everybody went for two areas. One was the phallic area, where there were all kinds of, sexual objects that supposedly witches did. I think many of them were completely physically impossible, but that's another story. And all the torture instruments. And the torture instruments had the most dramatic effect upon people from a pagan point of view, because they looked at these racks, and there was a peculiar thing that it was like a screw, and people would be sat on this thing, and it would actually be like a corkscrew.
Yeah.
That's as much as needs to be said about that one, but they were horrendous. And the biggest reaction was that these people turned around and they said, how on earth could anyone, let alone the church, do that to somebody? And it was a real poignant thing. So
there was a program on one of the cable channels about a year or two ago. It's about witchcraft, and they showed you some of the implements and ways you to torture people on it. And that was actually not just horrific because of the actual physical damage it would do, but also because of the actual thought behind it. The actual thought behind the actual torture.
Yeah.
Not the actual torture itself, but the minds of those people who could do that to somebody else for whatever reason.
Some of the stuff that was there, you wouldn't see in a Stephen King movie. I mean, you couldn't dream these things up without having a completely warped mind.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Actually, can I just say, I was saying about the Gerald Gardner thing earlier. This is in defence of Gerald. Many of the criticisms that are held against Gerald Gardner was he was once interviewed, and they said, how many people were killed in this witchcraft thing? And he said 19 million. And physically that was not possible at the time in Europe.
Well, there were that many people.
Right, no, there weren't. But we now have, from the research that we've done for the museum, we actually have, and I forget the exact figures, but I think it is 128,800, just over, actual documented people that were arrested for witchcraft, and there were 74,000 400 or something like that were actually executed for witchcraft.
Mm-hmm.
But, and I think this is what Gerald meant, was that if you relate that to the same percentage of the population to today,
That's the amount.
I'm not sure that it was 19 million, but what I can say
The
is
equivalent of.
it would. Well, yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. But what is for certain is that there were more witches put through that process than went through the Nazi concentration camps, pro rata.
Yeah.
You know, and over a very much longer period, of course.
Well, I mean, obviously the witchcraft persecutions fairly well documented in that respect,
Yeah.
you know, but especially by many pagans.
Yeah.
Although I do digress at some of the ones who think of this golden age of witchcraft, which I can't see myself, you know.
No, I agree with you. No.
Do you have any personal favourite item of Doreen's out of her collection? Is there one particular item that you find compelling, interesting, nice, or interesting? There must be quite a few to choose from.
Yeah, there is. I've got several favourites, really. The Bell Book of Figures, I just find are just... I can remember seeing in one of my earliest purchases about, that I bought of Doreen's, you know, one of her books, seeing these two figures that sat on an altar, and I never, from that day to this, have actually been able to find anything that was that powerful.
Mm.
So they are just wonderful pieces. But there are all kinds of things. We have this tiny little thing that's made out of birds. It's got that. There are birds' wings and birds' bones and stuff put into it. It's covered with. It's got it's a witch riding on a broomstick. It's very old, and it's got the head of some sort of a shell, and bits of bird beak coming out at the front for the nose and all this sort of stuff. It's tiny, tiny, tiny little thing. It's quite fallen apart actually, and part of the getting the museum together is restoring these things. But it's Italian, and that's as much as we know. But it's, I don't know, a couple hundred years old.
Just a minute, can I just ask a quick question?
Yeah.
We've got this table and the books and that. Could you take them
Yeah, of
back
course.
to Hexagon?
Yeah.
Great. I've
Yeah.
got Mitch on the phone.
Oh yeah. No. Yeah, no problem. Right, so that's that one. Some of the stuff that Gerald Gardner made for Doreen is special because, not because it was Gerald's, but it was made out of an extreme amount of love. You can see that.
Mm.
Her bracelet that was given to her on her third degree, Gerald made specially for her. And Gerald Gardner did a lot of very special things for people, and he made a lot of things, and that's really important.
There's always been, well, two sides of the coin to what you hear about Gerald.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm learning a lot about Gerald Gardner.
You hear a lot
Yeah.
of good stuff, especially obviously from the Gardnerians who have great respect for him, and you get negative stuff. Cecil Williamson didn't really have a great deal of nice things to say about Gerald.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Look, as far as Gerald Gardner is concerned, my honest feelings is he actually paved the way for an awful lot of people to do the things that we're doing now.
Well, I think the chat like that is unimportant to sort of say what sort of person was he like, because, I mean, it's like a musician. If someone sings a song that you like that particular musician, it doesn't matter if they're gay, they take drugs, they drink or whatever. It's the music that's important.
Absolutely, yeah. Look, you know, a question that was asked to me some time back, and they said, what happens, John, if you discover, and this was a Christian minister actually, in a debate I was involved with for an American television program, and they said, what happens, John, if you suddenly discover that all of this doesn't date back before the 1940s? Because that's often said, that none of this existed until the 1940s, when this guy Gerald Gardner made it all up. And I had to think for a second, and I said, and I very definitely mean this, is that I suddenly discovered in me a spirituality probably close on 30 years ago. I know it's 28 years ago, but I suddenly discovered that there was a spiritual side of me. So I went to church. I wasn't from a church family, but I thought, well, that's it, I must be a Christian. So off I went to church, and I was there. I went every Sunday for a few weeks, and then all of a sudden I just found out that there was some guy standing up there that didn't know me from Adam. He didn't know me. He didn't know who I was. He didn't know anything about me, and he stood there calling me a sinner. Not me directly, but all of the people. You people are all sinners, and I'd done nothing wrong. I knew then that wasn't right, and I suddenly discovered at some stage that my spirituality came about when I was halfway up a mountain with the wind in my face, when I was walking through a forest where it was heavily in leaf, or dipping my toes in the river, or paddling in the sea. It was when I was in touch with that. Now, whether Gerald Gardner made it all up or not, what Gerald Gardner did was he happened to put a name on what I felt.
Yeah.
I don't care if he made it all up. I don't think he did. In fact, I've got a
Well,
lot of
I mean,
evidence that
there's
says
too much
he
evidence
didn't.
to
Yeah.
show that.
I've
he
got a
didn't.
lot of evidence of the fact that he didn't make it up. But he managed to rekindle into an awful lot of people something that is very spiritual and very worthwhile.
Well, that's right. I mean, I didn't know the ins and outs of witchcraft. I just had the same sort of
Yeah,
feeling.
neither did I.
You just found something that fitted
Yeah.
what you wanted.
Yeah.
That's excellent. Going to other things now.
Yeah.
The Charge of the Goddess was been pretty well received in its publication.
Yeah.
And on the Doreen website, they've started serialising her novel.
Yeah.
Is that going to actually be published, or is it just going to appear on the website?
No, I think we'll publish it eventually.
So is it actually a complete
Yeah.
novel? It's not just
Yeah.
bits or...
No, it's a complete novel. Yeah. Yeah.
Is it about witchcraft? Have you read it?
Yeah, no, I've read it. Yeah, I would have published it. We would put it out unless I did. No, it's Doreen's stab, I think, at experimenting with where else she could actually support herself, and she wrote this story, and it's all based around Brighton. All of the people that are in there I think they're based on local people. But certainly, if Ditchling and Dyke Road and all kinds of stuff are all talked about within it. So it's all right. It's not an academic book, but it's Doreen expanding into other areas. It never was published. So.
But you do intend to do that?
Yeah. Well, we want to, but I mean, at the moment, this is one way of keeping the website interesting without having to do something dramatic and again, it's a way of putting something back. It's a serialisation over a long period of time, and I think there's a fun element of that. But yeah, I think
it's obviously going to keep people coming back to the site.
Yeah, which is the intention. But we want people to keep involved. We'd like people to get more involved with it. So, but yeah, we'll publish it eventually.
Now, another little thing, this is we got from the biography from Hexagon,
Yeah.
was that you received the title of Reverend from the Aquarian Tabernacle Church.
Yeah, that's right.
How did that come about?
Well, it's several stories really, but one of the things that was a problem with trying to raise capital and raise awareness for the museum project was the fact that I was telling the truth. I wasn't trying to hide what the museum was about, and was getting nowhere with, very often not getting anywhere. And it was actually suggested to me by another very, 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 very well-known writer that maybe if we had a reverend on board, that we may get further down the grant situation than currently we are with Mr. And I said, well, where on earth are we going to find a vicar that wants to get involved with this? And she said, you silly bugger. There is a way that we can do that, but you're going to have to prove yourself. So it was suggested that I contacted the people at the Aquarian Tabernacle Church and spoke to them, and Peter, who runs it, gave me a very hard time, spoke to an enormous amount of people to get references, because they actually have been granted the full rights of an academic course in the United States to give the title Reverend to a priesthood that will form the foundations for a lot of people worldwide. It doesn't happen in this country yet, but watch this space on that. So he checked me out thoroughly. He got references from, some of the references were quite flattering that he got, and then came back to me and said that he could offer me an honorary doctorate for my services to witchcraft without having to go through in the same way as. But this sounds awful, and I don't mean it in this way. But often somebody will be given an honorary degree by a university for their services to comedy, literature, or whatever. It's quite a common thing. In this particular instance, they've given me the title of Reverend. For what they consider my services to witchcraft are. Though I'm not sure what my services to witchcraft are. But I can now sign myself the Reverend John Belham-Payne, and
it helps get the grant.
It helps with the grant. So.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah. That's excellent. Oh, finally, you're now living in Spain. Any craft projects going on there, or is the witchcraft scene?
Do you know, the very first week that we were there, we moved there last June, and we didn't actually find a house to live in move in until kind of late August. And there is a newspaper over there called the So in English. It's for all the hundreds of expats or thousands of expats that live on the Costa del Sol. And we picked up an edition of there, and there was an article in there by a Spanish professor, and it said, "Witchcraft is dead in Andalusia. There is no more witches. It's a thing of the past." And the following week, there was all these letters saying, "Cooey."
So there is a movement out there then.
It's colossal, and the Spanish really amaze me with a lot of things, because it's obviously a very Catholic country, but they are so liberal-minded that they don't see, they're actually very curious. There's a chap over there that we got in touch because he'd written this piece in the website, and they've actually been raising their own money for quite some time, and they've bought a plot of land up in the mountains that they're actually putting into as a retreat. They're building a temple up there of some sort, so
there is definitely something there then.
Yeah, I was amazed, absolutely amazed.
You never really hear of anything happening in Spain.
No.
I mean, Italy, you think Italy, oh yeah, Strega, Radio, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Anywhere else, America, Europe, everywhere. But Spain just seems like, that's where they do the bullfighting.
Yeah.
But
they do the bullfighting there. They certainly bloody do the bullfighting.
Yeah, I've seen some TV. There's a TV program on Channel 4 a few months ago now. It's a 4-part series about bullfighting. Oh. It was fascinating and horrendous at the same time.
Yeah, but most things are, though, aren't they?
Yeah.
That. I'd love to go. I'd love to be able to say that I would go to a bullfight, but I don't think I ever will.
No.
I totally disapprove of it, of course.
Oh,
but
yeah.
But I think it's difficult to disapprove of something without actually having experienced it. And I don't mean by standing in that circle.
No, I wouldn't do that. That's for sure.
Those things chasing around after me. But
well, one thing that did get me though was that they did seem to have the matadors, the toreadors, had a great respect for the bull. It wasn't.
Well,
it was very strange that.
Actually, I was talking to a guy, another expat, a couple of weeks ago, and he was telling me about. I said, "Have you ever been to a bullfight?" And he said, "Oh, yeah, I used to go quite a lot." I said, "Oh, I don't think I ever could." He said, "Well, I think you ought to just once." He said, "But before you go, he said you should read this. You should read about it, because almost every movement that the matador, toreador, whatever he is, makes is out of a tradition, and it has a respect, and it is a ritual that they go through. So this whole thing of destroying this wonderful big beast, is set in very ancient history. I mean, it goes back to Roman times.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, like I say, it was fascinating seeing that stuff,
Yeah.
and hearing the matadors talking about their respect for the bull.
Yeah.
And not only that, the audience respect for the bull as
Yeah.
well. When you see, I mean, like I say, I totally oppose bullfighting. I
Yeah.
don't agree with it at all.
Yeah.
But when you're in Rome, must do as Romans, and to see that background to it was a bit of an insight.
Yeah. Where we live, we actually live about less than 2 miles from a bull ring. And every 2 or 3 Sundays there's a bullfight there. But what gets me is that I actually have been to a bullfight, but it was when I lived in California, and I used to have to spend, because of my status of living there, I had to spend a month every 4 months living in Tijuana in Mexico, which is not the greatest place in the world to live. So I went once to the bullfights there in Tijuana, and they have a totally different system there, because I still disagree with it, but what they have is a situation where the bull never gets killed, and the bull can be as big a star as the matador. So they will have matched fights from this particular fierce bull with this courageous matador. So what gets me about the Spanish bullfights is the bull enters that ring and he will be pulled out by his back legs, and I hate that. So I'm talking myself out of even thinking about going again, but no, it is amazing, you know.
Well, thank you, John, and wish you
Rumours.
luck with the museum, and if you need any help, whatever, just give us a shout and we'll always be there for you.
Great, thanks, mate.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Did you want to talk about the rumours?
Oh, yeah, we could do, couldn't we?
Yeah.
Where's that button gone again?
Because from my point of view, that'd be great if you can spot a few local ones.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
So, John, what these rumours that we've been hearing? There's been a lot of bitchcraft going around. There's a lot of talk. What's going on?
Oh, God knows. I don't know. There is. I seem to be one of those people that. I guess I am larger than life in many ways. I've spent almost all of my life in show business, and if you stand on a stage and you perform, there will be a number of people that think you're great, and there'll be a number of people that stand up and say, "Who the bloody hell does he think he is?" And I'm afraid that falls over into the craft world a lot. The term bitchcraft is there. Now, I don't know, you know, I get almost all the rumours that have been spread out about me by people that don't know me, or that have some sort of a grudge because I've got something they haven't got.
Yeah.
The Doreen Valiente collection has caused me probably far more aggravation than anything else. But that's because Doreen left it to me and she didn't leave it to somebody else. And I spoke to her about this. I said, Doreen, are you sure you want me to leave you all this stuff? And she said, I do. She said, but let me tell you, John, that it will cause you problems. I am sorry. I apologise now. And I said, well, why would you want me to put me through that? In a joking way. And she said, because you're big enough and ugly enough. It was true. Some of the things that I've been accused of, it would appear at the moment that I'm what's the latest one? I run everything that goes on in Brighton. That's one of the things. Is there something like that I've heard?
Well, we have heard talk about
All
it.
right,
You and Hexagon.
Oh,
actually.
Hexagon as well.
That was it, yeah.
Hexagon.
The mini mafia of Brighton, from what we gather.
The mini mafia of Brighton.
Sorry
Right.
to interrupt
Yeah.
again, but Jonathan's on the phone to John.
Oh, right. Okay.
Do excuse me, stay like this while I'm very embarrassed.
Yeah.
How's it going?
Yeah, very well, very well.
I didn't know you were back
We're
here.
just getting to the
What's
interesting
the
bit.
body?
Then.
Oh, sorry.
The bit about the Hexagon John Belham-Payne mafia running the Brighton pagan scene.
Oh, right. But really, mister, I wish I'd have known you were bringing back
I didn't know
bloody
myself.
Uber
I
this
got
morning.
Hexagon. There's no one there, typically.
Right.
Then they came upstairs about 15 minutes later, and
Right, I'll let you finish.
they reckoned it was a better place. And I thought, oh, the garden, you know.
Oh yeah, do you want another drink, John?
No, I'm all right.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Something cold.
Yeah.
Nice.
Sure you don't want a cold one, John?
Positive. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we're talking about the rumours about you and Hexagon running the Pagan Society here or something.
Yeah, I run the pagan world I definitely run the pagan world in Brighton from Spain. That's perfectly logical.
I mean, the strange thing is, I mean, obviously, even if you were, and if you and Hexagon were capable of doing it, despite your own workloads, I mean, what would be the harm in it?
What would be the point in it?
Well, you'd have a long way to come.
Look, you know, I love Brighton. I spent 20 years living in and around Brighton. You know, I spent the 7 years prior to moving to Spain, which had been there a year in Maresfield. But prior to that, I was 13 years living in Brighton. And when I left Brighton, when Fran and Rob set up the Brighton scenery, and they did more than anybody else, they set up the Brighton scene. We were very close friends, and I helped them as much as I possibly could. They set it up for the Pagan Federation. They ran the pub moots. I talked at the pub moots. If they hadn't got a guest speaker, I would do it because I'm used to, you know, being on stage, and that's.
I understood the talks. You're very good.
Yeah, so, yeah. Well, you know, I do my bit, but I moved out of Brighton, and I haven't been asked to any of the pub moots to talk for 7 years. I haven't been to a pub moot in Brighton for about 7 years.
Mm.
So I don't actually know now anybody that runs any of the pub moots in Brighton, you know?
Well, there's only one that I know of, and even we don't attend that.
Yeah.
Various reasons or another.
Yeah.
One, don't like the venue, but
Well,
neither here nor there. Yeah, it seems to have gone pretty much underground, although there are still obviously hundreds of pagans in Brighton.
yeah, there's more pagans in Brighton than any other town I know.
Mm.
Yet I get asked to go and talk, not to go and show off, but to go and talk. You know what I mean? So I get asked to go and talk, and I've been to Scotland. I've been overseas. I've just recorded a series of television programs for Argentina, not for Argentina, Venezuela. You know, I've done stuff in America. I recently, the last time I was back, I did a Old Musician Show Mate tour, but I did a number of pub moots, private talks, society talks in Birmingham, Manchester, Liverpool. I've done it in the West Country, Bristol, Wales, Scotland. I've been it, but Brighton never asked me to come and talk. So I don't know how I can possibly run the pagan scene in Brighton. You know, that's a good one.
Oh,
it's not the only one, but it's a good one. Oh no, some of the ones that were going around last year were absolutely bizarre. One of them, and my favourite one, I think, was that I'd run off to Spain with the hundreds of thousands of pounds that had been sent in to the Doreen Valiente appeal. Now, what Doreen had actually said was that she didn't want flowers. This happens all the time, doesn't it? You know, don't send flowers. If you want to send anything, send a donation to cancer research, the mind, all that sort of stuff. And what she said in hers was, you know, don't send flowers. If you want to do anything, send a donation to the Centre for Pagan Studies. The £238 that was actually sent in, most of it from America, is alive and well and sitting in the Building Society account.
No, it didn't pay for your big villa in Spain.
It didn't. No, it's not a big villa, but it certainly didn't do that. It wasn't worth running off to do that. So there were just some bizarre things. Oh, I don't know.
I mean, I think the greatest bit of many people is that, you know, you'd run off to Spain, you were going to sell the collection and retire to a life of luxury. I don't know, but
let me tell you, right, about this collection. One of the things that happened is that Gerald Gardner had given Doreen the title of Keeper of the Book of Shadows, and he'd given her that title because of his original book, and I think he thought more of that original book than she did.
Yeah.
But he said, no, because he gave it to her to research it, to look after it, to rewrite it, to do all the things which he accused him of being wrong with it. He made her he gave her the title of the Keeper of the Book of Shadows. When that was passed on to me, she said, "You do realise, John, that this is going to make you the Keeper of the Book of Shadows. You must never ever sell that letter." Who had was some negotiations had been opened up. I was offered most up at Mansfield to buy my villa in Spain, but I made a promise that I would pass that book on upon my death. I can't sell it. You know, I can't sell it. It's not mine. It is mine to sell. I can look her straight in the eye and say, I flogged it all. All right, how much did you get? Was it all right? What you can do is share that collection with everybody. You know, that requests from, and I can't remember all the universities, but we have the University of Belfast. There is one in Australia. You can never be in a situation where you hand over your house to somebody to come and research a library. You'd need to put all of this work, all of this research into a proper form to preserve a lot of this stuff, because they also see this as being, you know, the Book of Shadows. You know, we now don't touch the Book of Shadows by hand. We now have to wear white gloves. Still important. You know, so we have to set up a situation where these people can.
Well, one can only hope that the next person who's given guardianship to the collection will hand.
Right.
Well done, sir.
All right. Is that useful?
Oh yes, I think so. We've got about 2 issues worth there.
You and Ralph also are running Hexagon, don't you?
Oh, is Ralph as well? Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know
You and
that.
Ralph
Hey, without Hexagon, that book wouldn't have come out for an awful long time.
No.